Now on Radio 4, time for Moneybox with Paul Lewis.
Hello, in today's programme, as 650,000 people clock up £10 a day fines for not filing their tax return, we ask how they can get out of self-assessment and the fines. One listener takes on her energy company over direct debit increases.
My account had never gone into debit. It was always in credit, so I couldn't understand why they were taking more money as a direct debit at all.
Thousands of people are being sent a letter by the government warning their benefits will be cut next year. And the Finance Watchdog announces a £100 million compensation scheme for investors in a fund called Arch Crew. But who will pay for it? First, though, since Tuesday this week, 650,000 people have been clocking up a £10 a day fine, capped at £900. They've all committed the heinous offence of not filing their 2010-11 self-assessment tax return. The fines don't stop there. Altogether, it can cost £1,600 for this administrative omission. But if they can prove to the revenue they shouldn't be in self-assessment, they can escape these fines even now. More than 100,000 have rung a helpline and done just that. But others have tried and given up.
Thanks for waiting. One of our advisors will be with you as soon as possible.
I've been trying to get through to HMRC for days to tell them I shouldn't do self-assessment. It's a nightmare.
71 minutes on hold with HMRC the other day. Keeping the phone to my ear was a feat of endurance.
One of our advisors will be with you as soon as possible.
They just never answered the phone and I got fed up waiting.
Thanks for waiting.
Failed on the no self-assessment phone line, engaged then cut off. Why not online?
I've tried to ring on a number of occasions but never had my call answered and wrote to them but have had no reply.
Thanks for waiting.
Tried for 80 minutes cumulatively and 2 or 3 terminated calls. No human reply. I gave up a couple of weeks ago.
Well, those were tweets from Dan, Jess, Alison, Dave, Vikash and Robert, spoken by members of the Moneybox team. With me is Stephen Hardwick, Corporate Communications Director from Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. Stephen Hardwick, I'm tempted to say thanks for waiting. We heard those people who'd given up because it was too difficult to get through. What do you say to them?
Well, I'd say, first of all, that I'm very sorry to anyone who's been either holding on very, very long and having to wait for ages to get through to one of our call advisors, and to those who've tried and haven't been able to get on at all. And there's a very clear and simple explanation for this. We've just got an awful lot more calls at the moment than we expect at this time of year.
But that's partly because you sent a letter to 10 million on self-assessment saying they might be able to leave it, and then you just didn't put enough people on the phones, did you?
Well, we normally have about 2,000 people on the phones to deal with tax inquiries, but we've had in April about 1 million more call attempts than we did in April last year.
Well, that's because you sent this letter to people.
It's partly because we sent that letter. Actually, there's the right thing to do, because we know that there are people who aren't filling in their self-assessment forms who probably shouldn't be in self-assessment, and the only way we can get them out is if they fill the forms in. So this year we invented this grand new way of actually getting people to call us, and we've taken 130,000 people out of self-assessment. So it's actually, to some extent, been quite a success.
It's been a success for those people, though, of course, you then wrote to 12,000 of those, didn't you, and said they were going to be fine, but we'll leave that to one side. What's the average wait when people try to get through?
I don't really want to play statistics, because actually the average wait is not something that you'll believe, because the average is about 4 or 5 minutes. But
I tried on Wednesday afternoon. It was 3 minutes. It was 25 minutes at 3:30 in the afternoon.
That average includes people who get almost straight through on some lines where there isn't much demand, and some people who are holding on, as one of your tweeters said, 71 minutes, and that's simply unacceptable. We know it's unacceptable.
And why is there no information about where you are in the queue? I mean, even knowing you're 657th is better than not knowing where you are, isn't it?
Yeah, I understand that. Technically, we're just not able to do that at the moment. Our kit doesn't allow us to do that. And the reason people are on queues for an awful lot longer now than they used to be is in the old days, we used to just give people an engage tone. They didn't get in to the queue at all. Then we decided we'll expand the queue, let more and more people in, so at least when they got into the queue, they would eventually be answered.
Eventually, yes.
Eventually.
Is the problem that HMRC is cutting staff? I mean, I read you were losing 10,000 out of 64,000.
That isn't the problem, actually, because we're a modern organisation moving with the times. We have budget pressures like everybody else, and we think we can deliver the service that we do deliver more efficiently than we have done in the past.
OK, stay with us, Stephen, but let's go live now to Belfast to talk to Adrian Huston, who's a former tax inspector, now an accountant. Just tell us first, Adrian, who can come out of self-assessment briefly? A lot of people, I'm sure, listening think they'd like to do it.
Yes, Paul. Well, it's very important that people that got the letter read it carefully, because there's no point them ringing HMRC asking to come out of self-assessment if they are clearly in a category of someone who still has to file a return. You can get out if you're not a company director, you're not self-employed, you're not a landlord, you're not earning a fortune of a six-figure income. Then there's a good chance you'll get out. Unfortunately, some pensioners are caught in a terrible income range that their allowances are dictated by their exact income, and therefore HMRC wants to know every year what they earned.
And what's your criticism, if you have one of these helplines? Have your clients had similar problems?
My clients have massive problems, and I mean, I see that HMRC was trying to say on their web contact that they had a problem over Easter, but just the end of last week, last Friday, a client of mine rang HMRC. He didn't even get into the queue. He got a message, "I'm sorry, we can't take your call, please call again later."
So
That's
what should HMRC do?
Well, I think the first thing they should do is make these a Freephone telephone number, so that it's HMRC that's paying for the delays and not the poor customer who at home has to sit with the frustration of holding on to the phone. If they were on an 0800 number, at least they wouldn't be thinking, what's this doing to my phone bill?
What about alternatives? I mean, did you advise your clients to write or email? Is there any other way of doing it?
The fortunate thing for my clients, and we've clients across the UK, is I have a dedicated accountant's phone line. I can get through within 2 minutes. So for people who are fortunate to have someone like me, they can just get me to make the call. I'll get through. For other people, the best thing they can do is phone at a slightly off-peak time. Maybe at 6:30 in the evening, the phone lines are open till 8 o'clock.
Hard to know when
Avoid
that
the
is.
middle of the afternoon.
Okay. Stephen Hardwick, special line, better trained people for professionals. Why not for everyone?
Actually, all of our call advisors are very professional and dedicated staff. And one of the things that when people finally do get through to one of the call advisors is they do appreciate the advice they get.
But professionals get through a lot quicker.
They do. There is a line that they get through on. But let me just give you a couple of facts. We've put 240 more people on the lines in the last couple of weeks to deal with the call demand. They're answering 12,000 more calls a day than they were before. But we get 60 million calls a year, and 60% of those calls are what we would call assurance calls. People phoning, they've had a letter from us and they phone to check, have you received our letter back, and those sorts of things. We need to get rid of those calls.
And what about the free number, so that you're paying for the delays and not your hard-pressed customers?
I'm afraid that in current economic circumstances and budget constraints, that's not something we can afford to do within our budget. And like pretty much every other organisation with call centres, whether it's a bank or a utility company or a phone company, we have 0845 numbers, and that's the standard.
Right. And you wouldn't have a geographic number, because that would be cheaper for many people.
It wouldn't allow us to filter the calls through in the way that we can do through a central number.
Right. So no hope there. Stephen Hardwick, thanks for coming in, and also thanks to Adrian Huston in Belfast.